Now we're ready to start adding these creases and indents into our clay. You'll see that these two real pumpkins have these very indented creases around the outside. This one's a little less indented, but they are still a nice textured surface. So we're going to try and recreate that on our clay. You'll see one that I have prepared where the clay indents in. This is where my stem is going to go in a little bit. This is a student example from last year. She did this really beautiful ombre of color that I'll be able to show you. And then this is this gorgeous yellow pumpkin with this very simple center. I'm going to show you a very simple little stem like that and all of these creases. We're not opening our pumpkin up just yet. We have to do a little bit of work first. And to do that, you're going to decide where you want the top of your pumpkin to be. So I think this looks great to me. I'm going to tap it onto the surface, so I'm almost creating a base for my clay. And then I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to just gently push. But I'm not doing enough to push into the surface. I don't want to poke a hole in my clay. I just want to get a little bit of an idea. Now I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to draw an X on the top very lightly. After that X, I'm going to draw a plus sign. And these are going to be the lines that go, these are going to be the lines that are my creases. Now pumpkins have any number of creases. They could be odd or even numbers. It is completely up to you. I'm going to go with an even number of sections, but you could change yours. Now I'm going to take my pencil. I am not going to hold it straight against the surface. I'm going to hold it at an angle so that my pencil is just very gently resting on the side. And I'm going to draw or press a line all the way down to the bottom of my pumpkin. Almost as if you're going on a slide and you're going down with your bottom against the slide. I'm going to keep going until I have all of my lines drawn. Some of them might be a little bit thinner and closer together. Some might be further apart. And you may even decide that in some sections you want to add another crease. Maybe I'll add another one over here. Up to you. Now I'm going to take the back of my pencil or my eraser. You could even take one of your wooden tools. This wooden tool works really well because it has kind of a flat, smooth back. This one also works well, but I'm gonna go in with my eraser. And I know we're using a pencil in a way that is not normal, but that's okay. I'm gonna dip my eraser into some water just to make sure that it's moving nicely. And I'm gonna draw with my eraser into those creases. And again, it's not going to look perfect yet. Now I have these very kind of deep lines. I'm going to smooth them out in a moment, and I'll just do a few more. Notice that with my pencil, never with the point or with my eraser did I pop through my surface. If that happens, if you accidentally carve too deep or into your surface, remember our trick where we take a little piece of clay and you create a plug and you're going to smooth that back down and fill that hole. Now I can go back in, fix up my area, and continue outlining and defining my creases. Now once your creases are all defined, I'll finish my other ones in a moment. I'm going to go in with my finger, dip it in some water, and my pinky might even be the best finger for this. I'm gonna go into those creases again, and by spending a good amount of time repeating the same process, going over each of these lines, I'm now smoothing out my indentations and making them look a little bit more realistic, like a pumpkin. Pumpkins do not have harsh edges with their creases. They have these very nice soft edges. I'm even gonna take my sponge. You guessed it, I squeezed all the water out. And I'm going over the surface to take some of that moisture off. And I can even take my sponge, kind of pinch it at an angle, and use that to help define my crease. Once you have your pumpkin finished and looking nice and neat, remember to go over your pumpkin with a squeezed out sponge to get the surface nice and clear. Now you'll notice I'm missing something. I'm missing the stem. So I need to start creating my stem. Now your pumpkin is probably very soft right now, so it might be a good idea to let your pumpkin sit and firm up a little bit. Remember, as clay sits, it firms up in the air and it starts to dry out. So if you let it dry, you don't want it to sit for too long. I would give you maybe about 20 minutes or less to let it sit, and then check if it's not firm enough or if it's still very mushy and soft. You can just give it a very gentle squeeze. You might want to wait another 20 minutes. And then you're going to have to be prepared to create your stem by having some extra clay. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to add a stem to your pumpkin. Now you can decide what kind of stem you would like to attach. I made a little sorting hat type pumpkin for my little guy here. I even gave it a mouth opening, so you could do something a little bit funky if you would like. But don't open them up just yet. We're not there yet. This one I gave a really pretty swirly stem. This one has a very simple, nothing fancy, just a little nub, similar to this guy's stem that broke off. This one kind of loops around. And then I modeled my sample stem after this one. So I looped mine around as well. But the general idea for all stems is the same. You need to start with your clay feeling a little bit cold, so that when it's cold, it's starting to lose a little bit of moisture, and that's probably meaning that it's starting to dry out a little bit. So now I'm going to take nothing crazy, like a Tootsie Roll or bigger size of clay, and I'm going to start to make a thin, or not thin, but a small little like Tootsie Roll or coil. And one side I'm going to tap and make sure that it's flat-ish, because I'm going to attach it score and slipped to my pumpkin. Now I'm going to kind of make this a thinner stem. I have quite a thick stem happening there. So I'm going to make this a kind of cool stem looking like this one. So I'm going to make it a little bit thinner. And this is about the thickness of maybe one of my fingers. So not too much thinner than that. I'm going to flatten the bottom. And I'm going to shape this in a minute. I'm going to score the bottom of my stem, and I'm going to score where I plan on attaching it. It's okay if you score a little bit more than you are attaching. Add a little bit of water. Score again so that I have my kind of clay glue. I'm going to attach it by pressing down gently So my pumpkin stem is nice and attached. And give it a little bit of a wiggle and a twist on. I'm trying very hard not to change the shape of my pumpkin. And now I'm gonna start to take my fingers and I'm gonna kind of shape the clay. So using a little bit of moisture on my clay. If your clay is dry, it's gonna start to crack. So as long as your clay is a little bit softer, it should let you pull it and twist it. And I'm going to create, I think, a spiral stem. So this one's going to go like that. Now, I have a portion where these two pieces of clay are now touching. So I'm gonna gently lift that up and I can see a little area where they kind of overlapped. I'm gonna add some slip by slipping, and now I'm gonna attach those so I know that they're not gonna move. They are not gonna separate. Then I'm going to kind of rough up the side of this because a pumpkin stem is cut from a vine. So it usually has quite a kind of gnarled or gnarly looking stem, broken looking. So I'm gonna kind of fix that up. Then I'm gonna add some texture to it to make it look like it has a little bit more detail. So you'll see on my stem here, I added some texture, and all I did for that, nothing fancy. I'm gonna take my pencil, maybe even the stem of my pencil or the eraser of my pencil, goodness. And I'm gonna draw lines. And I'm making these kind of shallow, meaning they are not carving into the surface that deep. Now I want to smooth those lines out because I don't want them to be too prominent. So I'm going to take my sponge, squeeze all the water out like usual, and I'm just going to very gently smooth over that area until my stem looks the way I want it to. Now I'm ready to let my pumpkin dry out a little bit so that I can carve my hole in the bottom to let some air out like this, or I can open it up like this guy where I have a lid. Now that I'm ready to open up my pumpkins, there's a few different things that I need to decide. If I want my pumpkin just to have a hole on the bottom, my job is going to be quite a bit easier. All I have to do is flip it upside down, and then taking one of my loop tools, I'm going to very gently poke a hole in the bottom and pull out that clay. I'm going to smooth over the base, and now I have my hollow pumpkin. It's good to remember that whenever you have a closed ball or sphere of clay, you have to add an air hole. Otherwise, air will get trapped inside the clay, and when it goes into the kiln, it will explode. And it will explode in a not fun way. It will explode in a way that will ruin your project and the projects around yours. I will never fire a project that does not have an air hole. So my first pumpkin is complete. One thing I'm also going to do is on the bottom of my pumpkin, I'm gonna write my initials or my name. So I'm gonna write W-E. So I know very clearly that this is my pumpkin. I'm gonna set it aside. If you would like your pumpkin to be opened and used like a little container similar to this guy, you have a few more steps involved. So first, I'm gonna decide how far down I want my pumpkin to open, and I think I would like my pumpkin to open about halfway down. So I'm gonna take my pencil and I'm gonna draw a line around the outside. Now I'm not pressing too hard. You'll see my line being drawn here. And I'm going to kind kind of gently bring it all the way around until I meet the other line. Oop. And it's important that your two edges meet together, and that looks pretty good. Now, I'm gonna make sure that my pencil is nice and sharp, and I'm gonna start to retrace that line over and over. So with my very sharp pencil, I'm gonna trace it around a second time. And I'm trying not to damage the look of my pumpkin. I want it to still look aesthetically pleasing. And if you get any of those little clay boogers, you can just kind of erase them with your finger by taking them off. And then I'm gonna go in with either a flat tool that might look like a knife or a sharp edge, or with my comb tool, my scoring tool, I have this nice flat edge here. I'm gonna take this and I'm going to slowly insert it into the clay so that it is opening up my pumpkin. Until my pumpkin is completely open. You go nice and slow. This is not a process that you want to speed through, because I want to make sure that this looks good, because I am very excited about my pumpkin. Open this side, and you'll see I'm kind of going in and out with my tool. If you need to do a third rotation with your sharpened pencil, you can do that. But once my piece is ready, I'm able to take the lid off. Now, it's very, 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 very important that you do not change the shape of your pumpkin. You want to keep your lid fitting with the bottom. So one thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep the lid on, squeeze out all the water from my sponge as usual, and I'm gonna kind of tidy up my area. So I'm gonna try and get rid of some of those clay boogers. This will not reattach my lid, so don't worry. Going over my lines, just making sure that I did not make too much of a mess. And then I'm gonna take my scoring tool, or not my scoring tool, one of my wooden tools, and I'm just gonna go right in on the side, and I'm gonna kind of clean that edge up. Again, I'm still gonna be able to open up my pumpkin. I just want this to look a little bit smoother since I had to carve it open like a real pumpkin. There we go. I'm gonna go over one final time with my sponge for now. I'm gonna open it back up just with a very gentle squeeze. Once you see that opening spot, you can open it back up. Keeping my lid on, I'm now gonna make a note on my pumpkin where the two lines meet. So where I want them to open. So on my pumpkin here, I have a little line right here, and that is my message to myself that these two lines always connect, so that I'm not looking for the correct way to place my pumpkin. So I'm gonna give myself a line here, and I'm gonna do a second one here, just so I know these two lines will always match up. Now very gently, I'm gonna open my pumpkin again. I'm gonna take my sponge, and I'm gonna smooth down any of those bumpy, jagged edges. I'm not changing the shape. I'm holding my pumpkin very gently, and I'm gonna place it back down, double check, everything still fits. So I'm gonna put my lid to the side, and I'm gonna do the same thing to the bottom. And if you notice that you have some extra clay on the inside, you could take one of your wire loop tools. Without changing the shape of your pumpkin, you can carve out some of that clay to give yourself a smoother interior. Now remember and notice I'm being very gentle. I'm just doing little passes with my loop tool, and I'm not pressing hard so that I'm not damaging or changing the shape of my pumpkin. I'm gonna double check. I can see my two pieces line up here, and my pumpkin is still fitting together beautifully. So I'm gonna check my top, lift this off, give it a little squeeze. I have a little crease in here. I'm gonna do the same thing, take some of that extra clay out without harming the shape of my pumpkin. And then I'm gonna take my squeezed out sponge and go over any of those rough surfaces again, very gently. And I'm happy with how this pumpkin is looking. So I'm gonna double check. My side's over here. These two edges connect. If you notice that you change the shape of your pumpkin, you might be able to just press it back into shape, and it should come together with no problem. So mine did a good job. I'll take this little extra piece of clay and smooth that out. And then I'm gonna do a little bit of fine detailing, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So remember that if you need to, it's okay if you have to press your pumpkin back into shape a little bit after you do any fine detailing on your lid. It's okay if your pumpkin sticks together a tiny bit. With a little bit of a pinch, it should come apart. So you'll see it pop apart there, and that should be no problem. I did not score and slip these two halves of my pumpkin together, so it will still open up because I did not do any attachments. So remember that. I'm gonna double check that my seams are perfect. And then, just like with my other pumpkin, I'm gonna add my name on the bottom. I'm an artist, so I need to sign it like an artist. So I'm gonna take a pencil and I'm gonna gently give it my signature. Now my pumpkin is complete.